What's up, y'all? Robert Sykes, KetoSavage.com. Welcome to another A.M.A. This is a really good question. I'm excited about it, but before we dive into it, let's roll the intro. All right, we are back. So this question is brought to us by Sio. See, I'm probably going to butcher your name. I'm super sorry. You've been following me for a while, and I should know how to pronounce your name, but I do not. I think that's it, Sio. Hey, Robert, I started watching your channel around when you had done your 4,000 calorie challenge. You've done a lot of experimenting since then, and you've put on some muscle, too. I'm really curious as to where you are on this journey since it seems like 4,000 calories may no longer be a challenge anymore. Can you talk about your macros, how they are now, if they are at maintenance, and if you're reversing or maintaining? Okay, so love this question because for whatever reason, people think that it's all one way or the other. There's not really a state of flux, and it's always a state of flux. So let me just kind of paint a picture as to what I like to do with my maintenance intake, my surplus intake, my deficit intake, so that y'all can kind of know. As far as the macronutrient profile goes, I adjust my macronutrient ratio, so like the protein ratio, the fat ratio, if I'm in a contest prep or if I'm in a building phase, but normally it's always above 70% of my calories coming from fat and almost always below 80% of my calories coming from fat, except for the tail end of a competition prep. Typically, I'm around about 75 to 77% of my calories coming from fat. I can maintain that ratio year round if I wanted it, and I'd feel great. That's where I personally perform really, really well, both physically and mentally. From a calorie standpoint, let's dive into that because we're going to get into metabolism, we're going to get into building muscle, losing body fat, etc., etc. So, obviously, when I'm doing a competition prep, I'm going to optimize the efficiency at which I lose body fat by being in somewhat of a caloric deficit. There's a lot more in the equation than just calories, but when I'm in a competition prep, I transition from a maintenance or a surplus to a deficit, and I stay at a deficit that changes, but that is a deficit throughout the entirety of my competition prep. Typically, my preps last from 4 to 6 months. I don't like being in a competition prep. I don't like being in a deficit for more than that amount of time. So, you don't want to do a competition prep. You don't want to do a very aggressive cut every single year because if you're spending 4 to 6 months out of the year in a deficit, you're not really primed for building muscle. The more muscle you have, the more metabolism, the faster burning your metabolism is going to be. You're going to be able to just function at a better rate, and the more muscle, the better anyway. It's going to help with longevity. So I don't really want to stay at a deficit if I'm trying to also build muscle. So what I do there is, since it takes about 4 to 6 months to do a prep, and then it takes a few months to reverse out of that deficit and return to maintenance, you can't automatically go back to maintenance. If you spend 6 months at a deficit, your body's metabolism naturally is going to downregulate. That's normal, it's good, it's not a bad thing at all, but you can't automatically return to maintenance. You have to take some time to build that back up. So, let's paint a picture here. If I spend 4 or 6 months in a deficit, and then I spend the next 3 months, for instance, building those macros back up so that I'm back at a maintenance, that's 9 months of the year right there. That leaves another 3 months at a surplus to be able to build muscle. You can't really build a whole bunch of muscle in 3 months. This is why I do not recommend going through an aggressive cut or a competition prep every single year, because you're spending more time in a deficit or at maintenance or reversing out of that deficit and less time building muscle. This is why I typically compete every 2.5 or 3 years and spend the majority of my time in that surplus, focusing on building more muscle and looking better the next time I step on stage. So, I'm tracking macros and calories religiously when I'm doing a competition prep. I'm tracking macros and calories religiously when I'm doing a reverse diet, because when you come out of a deficit, your mind, your emotions, your hormones are all jacked up. Less so with keto, but they're still going to be, not normalized. So you don't really want to just allow yourself to intuitively eat, because you're more than likely going to overconsume things and you're going to put on a lot of unnecessary body fat too quickly. So I'll track everything religiously during that reverse diet as well. So now I've gone through the prep, tracked everything. Gone through the reverse diet, tracked everything. I'm at maintenance now. I might have a month or so of not really tracking at that maintenance so that I can just kind of chill out, give myself a breather from that religious tracking, and just, live a little bit. And then I'll focus on being in a surplus. And being in that surplus will take the majority of that time because it takes quite a bit of time to put on muscle, especially as a natural bodybuilder. And I'm not tracking as closely when I'm in a surplus because I'm less concerned about keeping my abs dialed in or having a whole bunch of vascularity in my biceps. I'm just focused on eating enough protein, enough dietary fat, enough calories to optimize and put on muscle tissue. But I'm not tracking it quite as strictly as I would be if I'm gearing up for competition prep. However, I don't recommend just constantly tracking nonstop in a deficit, in a reverse, in a surplus at all times, because eventually you're going to burn out. And when you burn out on tracking, it's going to make you less likely to track accurately when it is go time. So what I've personally done and found to be very effective is have that period of time after I've reached maintenance again, in which I'm not really tracking, I'm eating intuitively, I'm just kind of giving myself a breather. And for me, that time is right now. I did my prep earlier in the year. I spent the next 3 months or so getting back to my maintenance intake, which for me right now, my maintenance intake is a pretty large window. The more lean muscle tissue you have, the broader the window of your maintenance calories. There's not like a specific calorie amount of that's your maintenance. You probably have a window at which you can consume, and your weight's not really going to shift that much. For me, my window, my maintenance caloric intake window is about 2,800 calories to about 3,500 calories. Anywhere in that window, and I'm not really going to see much of a change in the scale weights. I personally prefer that 3,100 number or so, roughly around there. That way I'm not kind of on the lower end or on the upper end. I'm kind of right there in the sweet spot. So for me, right now, wanting to take a little bit of time away from the super strict tracking that I just came from, I'm focusing on eating adequate food at a maintenance, and I'm not really trying to go crazy high on my lifts. I'm just trying to improve the form and function and the efficiency of my lifts and just lay a super solid foundation, and then do all of this during hunting season. So I'm going off hunting, and I'm not going to have a gym there. I'm not going to be able to track all my food as strictly. So I just kind of roll with that rather than obsessing over tracking food. When I'm off in the middle of the woods and I can't even work out normally, I'll just let myself be at peace with that fact. I'll have that period of relaxation. I'll have that period of just intuitive eating adequate food, but not under-consuming or over-consuming, and not really training as intensely as I normally would. But I'll do that, and I'll time that during hunting season. So it kind of goes hand in hand. And then when hunting season's over and I've had enough time to just catch my breath, take a breather, I'm ready to get dialed in again. I'm ready to start tracking again. I'm ready to start hitting the gym with even more intensity. I'm ready to just get dialed in and be better for the next competition season. So that's where I'm at right now. It's hunting season right now. I'm eating intuitively. I'm around my maintenance of about 3,100 calories, 3,200 calories. Come the start of the year, I'll get things dialed in. I'll start tracking religiously again, and I'll focus on building muscle, and I'll stay at that building phase for the next probably 2 years before I think about competing again. So that's where I'm at. Thank you for the question. I encourage all of y'all to not constantly stay at a surplus, not constantly stay at a deficit, but adjust with your lifestyle, with your goals. Make sure you have adequate time in a maintenance, adequate time at a surplus, adequate time in a deficit. Learn how your body responds at each of those phases. Focus on building some muscle. When you're building muscle, embrace the fact that you're not going to be as lean. Take advantage of that period of time and just get better every single year as opposed to going backwards. So that's all I got to say about that. Thanks again for the question. You requested peanut butter bricks, so I've got some peanut butter bricks headed your way. Again, if anybody wants some free bricks, all you got to do is hit that link in the description of this video, submit a well thought out question. If I use it on the A.M.A, you get some free bricks. So thanks again, and I'll talk to you later.